I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, a half sunk, shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip, and sneer of cold command, tell that its sculptor well these passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed." And on the pedestal, these words appear: "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my work, see mighty in despair. Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." There are many forms of magic at work within A Song of Ice and Fire. Most obviously, there are dragons soaring in the skies and breathing fire, as well as ice zombies coming down from the north, seemingly to take over the continent. Less obviously, there are other forms of magic, such as glass candles or skin changing, or whatever fire magic the priests of R'hllor are capable of doing. Today, we're going to be talking about one location that has seemingly been marked by magic, or at least thought as such by the common consciousness. Curses are something that are fairly nebulous in A Song of Ice and Fire, even as magic goes, as nothing is really written on them as to how they might specifically play out. However, certain things are still known to be cursed. Most notably, and probably most commonly remarked upon in the books, is the idea of being a kinslayer being a curse. But in addition to that, we have the idea that this location, Harrenhal, the former seat of House Hoare of the Riverlands and Iron Islands, is cursed and that harm befalls all those that hold it. Today, we're going to delve into the history of this supposedly accursed castle, and we are going to kind of examine whether or not this curse is real and figure out the role that this massive fortress might play in the future of the story in the books. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and let's jump into the Curse of Harrenhal. As I mentioned in the intro, Harrenhal was built by a house that is now extinct in the modern series. Before House Greyjoy ruled the Iron Isles, King Hoare ruled over everything. That is Hoare. That is not a bad word. YouTube, please do not mark it as such. Regardless, the Hoares were very successful in terms of their overall conquest. The Iron Islands are known to raid the lands of the Westerlands and the Riverlands, and none have been so successful as the line of the Black Kings of Hoare. Specifically, they ended up ruling over essentially the entirety of the Riverlands prior to Aegon's conquest, in addition to their Iron Islands. During this period, the rulers of House Hoare, specifically King Harren, treated this new land that they had gained into their empire as essentially just resources to be plundered. From those resources stolen from the people of the Riverlands, King Harren built a massive castle, unrivaled by anything else in Westeros. And even in the modern day, it's still one of the largest castles in the entirety of the continent. This castle did come to be known as Harrenhal, named for the man who built it. Harrenhal would only exist in its completed state for a little under 2 years. Aegon the Conqueror had come to Westeros, and it was his aim to unite these squabbling seven kingdoms into a singular nation ruled by a singular dragon lord. It is said that Harren was an early part of his conquest. The armies of the Dragon King came upon this massive castle in the middle of the Riverlands and ended up gaining a lot of allies. The Riverlanders did not want these Iron Islanders to rule over them, and rallied behind the banners of Aegon. Harren and Aegon soon met on the bridge outside of Harrenhal. A discussion soon began that is chronicled both in the World of Ice and Fire and in Fire and Blood. Harren probably should have been scared of the armies and dragons sitting at his gate, but he wasn't. He was confident in the palace he had built. He said to Aegon that the walls were thick stone and that he would be safe inside from anything the Conqueror would do. Aegon pointed out that his dragons fly and that they breathe fire, and said that if Harren didn't surrender by the time night fell, his line would end. Harren did not surrender, as is the typical tradition of the Ironborn, even in the main series. And soon the night was alight with screams and fire. It's some of the best prose in Fire and Blood, and I know that using the words prose and Fire and Blood in the same sentence might make some people angry, but the tower is being described as melting candles alight with black and red flame in the night is a striking image that has stuck with me since reading Fire and Blood. Before continuing with the inspiration, I think it's interesting to delve into the potential historical inspiration for Harrenhal. I haven't seen this covered by many other people, and I think it's interesting to talk about. Specifically, I think that Harrenhal is inspired by a temple of Claudius, built by the Roman Empire in Colchester, England. Specifically, this temple was designed to deify this former emperor, Claudius. It was built over the course of over a decade, and when it was finally finished, it only stood for about 2 years, the same amount of time as Harrenhal. It was burned as the English did not want to recognize this deified Roman emperor, excuse me, not empire, as their true god. And I think it very much parallels the kind of sacking of Harrenhal as done by Aegon. There is still a ruin, which I'll picture on screen while I'm talking about this, that exists today, but it is not nearly as big as the ruin of Harrenhal. But it's also far older than the 300 years that Harrenhal is at present. What happened next was essentially a game of lordship musical chairs, as the title of Lord of Harrenhal is passed around between a bunch of noble families, both before the series in the history of Westeros and during the main series proper. I'm going to go through those events quite quickly in the next two sections, and I advise you buckle up, as there are a lot of families that I'm going to go through. So, immediately after the conquest, House Chorus held Harrenhal from 1 AC to 37 AC. However, a man named Harren the Red soon began raiding in the Riverlands again, and this ended up wiping out House Chorus, which makes sense. Harren the Red is paralleling Harren the Black, as the two seem to be members of the same family, or at least claiming to be, and they would want to reclaim their seat. After this, House Harroway holds Harrenhal, that was a tongue twister, from 37 to 44. They gain the seat for supporting Maegor against Aegon the Uncrowned, but lose the seat because Maegor doesn't like them anymore after that. Additionally, House Towers rules after that from 44 to 61, dying without heirs. And during this era, Rhaena Targaryen holds the Widow Tower, which is a specific area of the castle. She is someone who is the widowed queen of Aegon the Uncrowned, as mentioned earlier. How Strong then holds Harrenhal from 73 AC to 131 AC. I'm not going to mention details on that for House of the Dragon spoiler reasons. Additionally, from 151 AC until an unknown time before the Dance of the Dragons, House Loston held Harrenhal, but they ended up losing it because of the Blackfire Rebellions, in which they participated on the wrong side. Additionally, after that point, at an unknown point in time, House Went held Harrenhal for about 3 generations. However, as of the start of the main series, Lady Shayla Went is the last of her line. She had 5 kids, but outlived all of them, and she ends up dying in 298 AC and passing the title of Lord of Harrenhal on to one Lord Janos Slynt, who then passed it on to Lord Peter Baelish after he is dispossessed by Tyrion. In the main series, a large number of unique individuals have held this castle, and the misfortune that has befallen all of them is what leads many to believe that this castle is cursed. Specifically, starting out with Shayla Went, as we talked about earlier, all of her family died. Janos Slynt was given the title of Lord of Harrenhal by the Lannisters before it was stripped away. He was sent to the wall and he was executed by Jon Snow. After that, Tywin Lannister takes possession of Harrenhal near the start of the War of the Five Kings. He is later slain, as we know, by Tyrion. Armory Lorch is then named Castellan. He is also later fed to a bear in the castle's very own bear pit, so not very good for him. Roose Bolton held Harrenhal for a time. He's fine as of the current point in the series, but it doesn't seem likely that that'll be the case forever. In the same boat, Pattaya Baelish ends up holding the castle as Lord of Harrenhal, though he never steps foot in the castle itself. And it seems as though he could be headed for some bad luck, as he is a schemer who is heading into what seems to be an age where many schemers will be up against forces like zombies and dragons, where they can't really get out of that with their brain power. What's more, other smaller people have held the castle since then. Vargo Hoat was given Harrenhal and then killed in the orders of Tywin for what he did to Jaime. Gregor Clegane held it after that and ended up dying against Oberyn in the trial by combat, and he was never seen again. We don't know what happened to him. We're still looking. And then Polliver ends up holding it for a while, who's killed by the Hound at the Crossroads Inn. And at present, Jaime goes there in his third chapter in A Feast for Crows, and one Bonifer Hasty is named Castellan in that very chapter. So he is currently holding Harrenhal. We have not heard of it since that point. If you all will excuse me, I need to rant about Bonifer Hasty for a second. Bonifer Hasty perplexes me. He's a young landed knight who ends up falling in love with a Targaryen princess, Rhaella Targaryen, the mother of Rhaegar, Viserys, and Daenerys in the main story, and eventual queen of the Mad King, and ends up essentially being rejected by her, unfortunately, because she is forced to marry her brother, which sounds like a nice little love story. I think that definitely means that Rhaegar is the son of Bonifer Hasty rather than him having Dark Sister, unfortunately, though I do like that very, very real theory. In addition to this, he goes on to found the Holy Hundred, which is a almost sellsword company in Westeros that kind of perplexes me. It's devoted to the faith of the Seven and ends up joining the War of the Five Kings on Renly's side. But after Renly is killed, this army goes over to Stannis. We later confirm this, given that Bonifer swears fealty to Joffrey after the Blackwater, but I don't really know why they would support Stannis after that, because he is a devout follower of the Lord of Light and was burning heretics for supporting the Seven. I don't know how he allowed the Holy Hundred to exist under his watch, but it's kind of strange. Also, Jamie calls him Baelor Butthole, and I just thought that was funny as well. But he's just, I don't know, he scratches my brain in a weird way, and I don't know why. Now that we've confirmed that Bonifer Hasty is the father of Rhaegar Targaryen, we can return to Harrenhal and the topic of its curse. The idea that this castle is cursed is a popular one that goes far back in Westerosi history. And looking at it, there does seem to be good reason for this castle to be cursed, of all castles. Because if we think of curses, we think of like people who have died with grudges, and that very much fits the idea of the entirety of Harren's line, him and all of his sons, burning in this castle that they had spent so long building. What's more, we know that Rhaena Targaryen, the queen who probably should have been, not the queen who ever never was, that was Rhaenys, ends up living here for the end of her days and ends up actually getting burned and interred here. So her spirit could be running around as well. So overall, the idea that if a place in Westeros was to be cursed, it could very much be Harrenhal. Though it is also worth mentioning that is a pretty young castle as far as Westerosi castles go, so it hasn't had enough time to accumulate as many ghosts as maybe Winterfell might have. It's also worth noting that even skeptical characters like Wyman Manderley and Peter Baelish seem to be kind of trepidatious regarding this castle, as they both have passages in, I believe, Clash and Storm, respectively, expressing their concern for those who are holding Harrenhal, including himself, in Peter's case. However, I don't believe that Peter's fear here is legitimate. We see in House of the Dragon that Larys Strong takes advantage of the Curse of Harrenhal to create a fire in which both his father and brother are burned alive. This shows that the curse can kind of be co opted by scheming figures in order to kind of pass their own agenda off as just kind of the will of these ghosts, these spirits, or whatever is going to happen, as something accidental. And I think that Littlefinger could very much be doing that as well, as in that passage he is talking with Sansa, and he seems to be trying to scare Sansa away from taking any other path than accompanying him to the Vale. I also think that a lot of the misfortune that has befallen the houses that have held Harrenhal could also be accounted for by its location and general stature. Harrenhal is a massive castle, but because it's a ruin, it's really indefensible. There's not any good walls, they were all burned down, and despite the fact that the lands are very fertile surrounding it, there really isn't much to be gained from holding Harrenhal. The wiki even refers to it as a white elephant, which I quite like, as it does seem to be something that people don't really gain any benefit for owning, other than Peter, who's able to marry Lysa because of it. Additionally, the location of Harrenhal needs to be considered when considering a curse. It might not be cursed, it might just be in a really bad location, as it is in such a central part of Westeros that it is very likely to be hit by any conflict that ends up happening. We know that Robert's Rebellion happens a lot around there, specifically the tourney that is at Harrenhal ends up starting a lot of Robert's Rebellion, and we know that the Riverlands are the worst of the Seven Kingdoms affected by the War of the Five Kings. Now that we've looked at the tumultuous past and present of Harrenhal, we can look towards its future in the series. I believe that Harrenhal is likely to be kind of spared from the coming conflicts in a big way. If we look at the big enemies approaching Westeros, at least from the commoner Westerosi perspective at this point, we have Daenerys coming from the east and the White Walkers coming from the far north. We see that both of these conflicts are likely to take place in other locations. King's Landing seems like the most likely spot for Daenerys to want to focus and attack. And additionally, the others are probably going to end up coming just straight down from the north and hopefully getting stopped before Harrenhal. That said, I do think that Harrenhal still has some role to play in the future of the story. After the undead are dealt with, once the northern forces are coming south, I could see Harrenhal as a likely place that they would meet resistance from whoever is holding King's Landing at that point. Additionally, I think that there is some massive Chekhov's gun going on around Harrenhal, specifically two things. Harrenhal is said to have a massive godswood with a still living weirwood in it. And additionally, Harrenhal is the closest castle, and it's very close to the Isle of Faces, this mysterious island full of weirwoods in the middle of a very important lake where many historical events have happened. It seems as though this lake and this island are going to play a massive role in the story in the future, and I would not doubt that at least several characters will return to Harrenhal both before and after they would visit this island. Harrenhal has played a massive role in the past, present, and likely future of A Song of Ice and Fire. Many characters have had pivotal chapters there, and it seems as though there is at least a strong case to be made that it has been cursed by some malevolent force, be that Rhaena Targaryen or the forces of House Hor. Regardless of any of this, it does seem to be crucial to Martin's workings in the future as the Isle of Faces has been built up as an important location to magical ideas in the north, and it has never been seen in the series so far. Additionally, it is confirmed that this is where Taisha lives, as she was said to go wherever whores go. Thank you all for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I thought I'd experiment with a bit more of a serious or more dramatic opening, as I just had that idea pop into my head, fully formed like Athena, and just kind of contrasting that poem that I really like with Jaime's arc in A Storm of Swords and what he thinks of Heron's Folly very early on in that book. If you enjoyed, like I said at the top, be sure to leave a like, subscribe. It really helps me grow the channel, really helps me feel good. I'll be back with more theories and lore in the future, and I really appreciate you tuning in, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you again for watching. Goodbye.